I felt in my role as a tabla accompanist primarily, because that's what your career is when you are a tabla player. Your solo concerts are far in between, and your accompaniment is more what you do. So I felt that I had peaked, and I felt that there was a lot more that I wanted to do. And the reason for that, I think now in hindsight, is the upbringing. Because I was born in Kolkata, when I was 1 year old, I was taken to San Rafael, where I grew up till I was 6 years old, at the Ali Akbar College of Music, and Tejinuddin is Ali Akbar Khan Sahab's most well-known student today. And I grew up in the college till I was 6, and growing up there in that American environment, the Bay Area, watching my father collaborate with the likes of John Handy, the Grateful Dead were his students. So that kind of very very. But I had no consciousness of it because I was too young. I was completely growing up on Sesame Street and Speed Racer and Walt Disney on television. But then we came back to Kolkata because Baba, my father, said that my son will never play tabla if he lives here. He's calling me dad. So we came back to Kolkata, and a very young Ustad Zakir Hussain replaced Baba in the Alipur College. Zakir Bhai used to live in the on the floor below us. He used to share with Chitresh Das, the famous Kathak dancer, and we used to live on the first floor. Dutalaye amra thaktam, ektalaye ora thaktam. So Zakir Bhai used to famously now babysit me also. So then we came back to Kolkata. In Kolkata, I went to La Matinee for boys. There was hardly any Indian classical music happening there. We had a band called the Satellites. We were doing covers of Rolling Stones, Bee Gees, Beatles, and at home, strict talim was happening. And my mother was learning from Munawwar Ali Khan Sahab, and I used to walk down to Balu Haqqaq Lane, Bade Ghulam Ali Khan Sahab's son. And there I used to, going up the steps with still, close your eyes and let me kiss you in my ears, I am going up the steps to Kinare Kinare and Ayana Balam. So all of this, I never made any sense of it then. But I think because it was all inside me, at one point it was crying to come out, and I think, for want of a better word, the juxtapositions that were created through this genre of music was what I wanted to gravitate towards, because I wanted to make sense of all these genres, and also these cultural milieus. Each, and you know that really well, that such incredibly diverse cultural milieus. If you are studying in a La Matinee, you saying the word Lord's Prayer, and then you coming home and you're going to Ma Kali Darshan, then Manohar Ali Khan Sahab's house, you're going to Pir Baba Dargah, all of that is happening. So that's the world we grew up in, and unfortunately the world is very different today. But we're hoping it's going to be back on track again. And so fusion, for want of a better word, the modern word is world music, is an umbrella of sorts which brings people and cultures together. So I think that is what drove me towards this. I wanted to make sense of it all. There's one more point. I also was a bit frustrated with the role of the tabla player. The tabla player, and I have, amongst many of my close friends, Shugata is one of them, but I've also complained to Tejinuddin also. He's one of the guys who's never really, it's been great playing with him, because there was no that kind of me overshadowing him overshadowing me. That kind of thing was not there. It's been a fantastic relationship that way. Musically very mature. So that used to really bother me, that the tabla player was the guy on the side, and he was not meant to be doing a lot, even if he could do a lot. And I wanted to create a show which had tabla at the epicenter of the show. But I cannot not mention people like Shekharji, my Guruji, without whom couldn't have happened. Pulak, Abhishek, all those who participated in Rhythmscape over the years, the older lot also, many of them. So it all was a cosmic machination.
Wow. Okay, I went. But of course, I was shocked that I thoroughly not only enjoyed myself the whole evening, but this is the important point, that I came away with certain melodic patterns that were buzzing in my head, which I didn't expect to be generated in a fusion concert. Now the question that this brings to me is that how do you balance the rudari of, say, Indian classical music with the pulsating throb of rhythm? That's one. The other thing that we were hearing without being able to understand because I didn't have a language for it were new sounds. So what were those new sounds? And you explained to some extent that probably you had a very unique kind of background, and especially your education. I don't think I know another, even Zakir Bhai doesn't qualify, a serious Indian classical musician with your level of westernized, top of the line, St. Xavier's, La Martiniere kind of education and the world that it exposes you to. So where were you getting these inputs? How were you handling so much that you had exposure to?
Great question, thank you. It's all about a need at the end of the day. I needed to have a voice. And of course, a part of that voice was to keep my father's legacy and to play good tabla, which I had kind of done up until that point, but that was the only thing I had done. And then there was a composer inside me. And I knew that as a child also, because I used to make songs in school and all of that. And there was also all this myriad kind of, soundscapes and cultures that I was exposed to. And I wanted to bring all of that to the stage and to albums and compose music of that kind. I think one of the most important things, two things I will mention here. I grew up on Ali Akbar Khan. Akbar Khan Sahib's music, because I was growing up in the college, was in my ears. And Baba was playing with him all through that whole decade. I had soul sitting in my ears. And then my mother's Patiala Gharana exposure with Munawar Khan Sahib and listening to them, and Ghulam Ali, the ghazal singer, coming, and everybody was around, and there was this an incredible plethora of melody going on. It was not just Shankar Ghosh and tabla, it was also all of that. And I think I was imbibing subconsciously a lot from the environment. And that gave me the desire to explore Rudari. And I think the reason that Rhythmscape has survived, or that it had a different voice from, say, even a Shakti, because I had based my compositions on melody. They were not based on rhythm. They were based on melody. So melody, and then the rhythm was coming in and supporting the melody.
Right.
I think that's what got people to, or you were just saying that the melody stuck, So those things, people would get stuck on, and it was like a song that would play. So that was a conscious decision that I made then. And that has really helped me further down in my film scoring. Because that melodic exposure, I think, was one of the most important things that I brought to the table.
Because I don't know the answer, so I'm dying to hear.
I felt Indian classical music was missing a register. Indian classical music was missing the lower register. So if you think of a contrabass in Western classical music, that low register, which in Western popular music was taken over by the bass guitar, that register was missing in Indian classical music. And I was frustrated that my school friends from La Martiniere, or many of my college friends from Xavier's also, didn't come to my classical concerts. They used to say, it's a bit tough and we don't understand, so we don't. So I felt also, and I researched that for a long time, that I realized that there was this subwoofer sound that was exciting them in other popular shows, which they were missing. So again, cosmic intervention. Year 2000, I was in Osaka, and I chanced upon this amazing hand drum machine called the Hand Sonic, which I saw for the first time, and it was just launched, and a Japanese instrument, and I bought it for $1,000 in the year 2000. It was a lot of money. I came back and I started experimenting with it, and I found the SH-101 bass guitar tone in that instrument. And I then realized that if I combine my low sa tabla, which is the Pakhawaj tabla or the Mridangam tabla, which is what I used to play. I used to call it the Carnatic tabla because I learned from Uncle Shekharji. And when I combined that with this, it resonated and it also gave me the dignity of classical music. Because that lower register gave it a Pakhawaj feel, but with a staccato bass guitar sound, which made it contemporary also. So these were the things I was toying around with, and there was a lot of thought that went into it, a lot of experimentation. I sat at home for 2 years. I took an SBI loan. For home renovation, because nobody gives you a loan for making an album,
Music
or filmmakers for making a movie. Nobody gives you a loan. So,
but you were actually renovating music.
I didn't know then, I guess, later on. But yeah, so that's how it all transpired. I did not anticipate was the reaction of the dance fraternity. Everybody, every form of dance has choreographed rhythmscape, and that I don't know how that transpired, because I was making melodies, but then the rhythms, I guess, were doing something which was choreographable, if that's even a word.
You know, surprising you say that, because sometimes, you know, like fill in the blanks, we are called to schools and everywhere to judge these festivals, and there are always these dance events. And in the earlier days, I could always recognize your music because, you know, it was playing, and I used to wonder, do they pay him? Now that you say, it probably was the rhythm, but it had an Indianness and an identity to it that the dance could identify with. So this brings me to another question, which is, you mentioned that, and you've really been so versatile, the kind of things you've been doing, and it's not that just doing, but doing it at a very good standard and sustaining each of those genres for quite a lot of time. So it needs talent, it needs effort, it needs luck, and luckily you have all of it. But I think the question here is that you yourself, how do you rate yourself as a composer versus a musician?
Every week it's a different person. So if I'm doing 12 concerts in a row, I start missing the studio. If I'm in the studio for 10 days in a row, I miss the concerts. So I think, you know, it's all of it, and I gradually gravitated towards creating a lifestyle where all of it was incorporated, you know. So I made a studio much before anybody in my generation had a studio, you know. So I had a studio more than 20 years back. So it's always been there. I go to the studio every day, even today. So therefore the content there's a lot of content. But I think, you know, what you think and what you truly desire is what you manifest. And for me, I wanted to manifest the concerts, the collaborations, and the films. And so I have no background or no credentials for film scoring at all. I mean, I work with a Tony, or I work with a Subhrajit, and they've seen how I work. I mean, I don't write anything. I can't write a line of music. So I just sing everything. And ওই মা একটু গান শিখিয়েছিল বলে ওটা
গিয়ে শোনাও না,
আমি গাইতে পারি না।
গান বাজানো তো অনেক শুনেছি, এবার একটু
গান গাইলে আমি নিজেই পালিয়ে যাবো, so সেটা হবে না। কিন্তু but that is the, you know, that's how it all has panned out. And I think, you know, I've also been lucky, as you said, you know, what I desired came my way. Though I thought it came late, but now in hindsight I don't think, because I think it came at the right time. I was mature enough to handle something, you know. Otherwise I would have, I mean, Subhrajit would not have repeated me, or Tony wouldn't be talking to me about making music for some other film, because he would say that, you know, oh, ye to tabla hi bajabe. He didn't let me play tabla in the film. He refused. He said, "Dear mate, kono tabla thakbe na." You know, why so biased?
The end, because the boss is signaling from the corner. So, you know, like fusion is now an epidemic. To the fact that when I was driving in, I saw the medical conference is also called Fusion something else.
I saw that too.
So I first thought that was Bikram's event. Then I said, no, there's all kinds of tablets and things under it, so may not be. Yes, as you enter. So my final question to you, Bikram, is that what do you want your legacy to be?
A man who worked hard, tried to learn all his life, and was able to work at a standard that people, at least over a period of time, think that it is original and it is something that can inspire another generation. I am not into lofty thoughts. I would rather just leave it at, a certain amount of influence. You don't expect to be the next Rabindranath or the next Satyajit Ray or anything, I mean, as long as people are thinking that, if they think that this man worked hard at it and he did something of substance, I think the rest is left to upstairs. I'm happy with that.
Well, at that happy note, I think we can bring this conversation to an end
Thank you so much.
and continue pushing the bar.